All right, we are back with our next part of the story. We have a heading up here, is life liquid, Atacama Desert, Chile, and this is talking about the country of Chile. Our subheading here is, can life exist in a hot, dry place? So this subheading tells me that everything below is going to talk about life existing in a hot, dry place. This is different from Antarctica because Antarctica was dry and cold. This is hot. So here we go. In January 2004, two robotic rovers, which are like robots, landed on Mars. Spirit, which is one of them, rolled through Gusev crater on the opposite side of the planet. Opportunity, the name of the other rover, puttered around a dusty plain called the Meridiani Planium. NASA sent the rovers to Mars to find out if the planet once had liquid water, enough liquid water for life to exist. In searching for aliens, and remember, this is where we're talking about microbes as being aliens, not like the green men. NASA's motto is follow the water. As Spirit and Opportunity were humming around Mars, 40 million miles, that's 64 million kilometers away, Chris and his NASA colleagues, which are his working people, were exploring the Atacama Desert in South America. They weren't following the water. They were looking for spots with as little water as possible. Here is an artist's idea of what a rover looks like on Mars. So this is not a real picture. Subheading, very little rain on the plain. So all the stuff below is going to tell me about the rain in this area of the plain. To get to the Atacama, Chris and several other scientists and students spent a day flying from San Francisco to Antofagasta, Chile. From Antofagasta, they drove 2 hours through the desert to a research station. And then in parentheses, it's telling us it took Spirit and Opportunity, which are those Mars rovers, 7 months to get to Earth, or get from Earth to Mars. The research station was just a desert shack that housed a kitchen and a laboratory. Water was brought in by truck. The scientists pitched their tents, which if you say pitched a tent, it just means set up their tents, along a line of scrubby trees left over from an agricultural experiment. The trees were the only bits of green for miles around. Soon after arriving, Chris checked his weather sensors. It had rained a few weeks before, and he says it was the biggest rain since 1994, about a fifth of an inch, recalled Chris. For the Atacama, that's a flood. So a fifth of an inch would probably, if you can see my pen here, maybe from the top of this clicker to the bottom would be a fifth of an inch. So he's saying that's the most rain it has had for like 20 years, and it's considered to be a flood. That's how dry it is there. When Chris first visited the Atacama in 1994, he set up sensors to measure rainfall. For 2 years, his sensors didn't record a single drop of rain. No rain for 2 years. Chris thought they were broken, but they weren't. The lack of water was good news. Chris had found the driest desert in the world. The Atacama was even drier than Antarctica's dry valleys. I'm going to stop for a second and go up to this picture. Here are the trees they talked about. Here's what their research area looks like. This is an aerial view. Aerial means kind of like what a drone might see. So it's from atop looking down of the scientist camp. The scientists slept in tents at their research station in Atacama. Okay. Paragraph 27. There are lots of places where people say it doesn't rain, like the Gobi Desert in Mongolia or the Australian outback, explained Chris. But the Atacama is truly the driest place we have found. In fact, if the sky over the Atacama were reddish instead of blue, the super dry desert would look like a lot like super dry Mars. All right. Our next subheading is looking for life in the Atacama. It means everything in these paragraphs below is going to tell me about how he's looking for life. Chris and his colleagues tested the Atacama soil and rocks for evidence of life. They tried some of the same soil experiments used by the Viking spacecrafts when they visited Mars in 1976. If Viking had landed in certain areas of the Atacama, its tests would have said the Earth is a dead planet, said Chris. So that's just explaining how dry this desert is. Chris tried other experiments. He brought rocks from other deserts and put them in the Atacama. On the underside of the rocks were microbes adapted to living in very dry places. The Atacama even killed those hardy microbes. Let me explain this experiment. He went to other very dry deserts, got rocks that had like the fungus on them or the mold or bacteria, microbes, put those into the Atacama, and the Atacama was still so dry and so hot that it killed those. So back to paragraph 30. The Atacama isn't entirely dead, though some of the Atacama soil Chris collected did have live microbes. We wondered how they survived, said Chris. Did they grow in the Atacama, or were they blown in by wind? And we found them just before they died. Okay. Surprisingly, this picture does not have a caption. I am going to make an inference that this is a picture of the Atacama Desert. But maybe this paragraph down here will tell me. To find out if the microbes fell from the sky, Chris needed to take samples of air over the Atacama. If the microbes were blown into the Atacama by wind, the air would have the same amount of microbes, no matter where in the Atacama Chris took a sample. The conditions on the ground below, less dry or super dry, shouldn't affect the number of microbes in the air. So his theory is that these microbes were blown, remember they're super tiny particles, were blown in to the air, and that's how they got there. So Chris brought along a helium balloon. The balloon was hard to handle in the desert wind. It bounced around like a crazed ping pong ball. It went every direction but up, recalled Chris. A small pump hung from the balloon. Once the bucking balloon was in the air, Chris turned the pump on using a remote control device. The pump sucked in a bit of air into a sealed dish. The balloon was pulled down, the dish was removed, and a new one was inserted. Later, all the sealed dishes were brought into the lab and checked for microbial life. Okay, so here, let's start with this close-up image. You can see how big the balloon is. Chris is holding the air sampling balloon to keep it from flying off. Then, oh, look. Okay, a small pump hanging from the green balloon sucks in air, which will be checked for microbial life. So this picture here is pretty much the same as this one. So I think my inference was correct. I am going to keep reading until we get to that sidebar. All right. I'm going to go ahead and read these captions. While Chris was in the Atacama, NASA rovers were scrambling around Mars. At the left, which is this one, a ridge in the Atacama. At the right is a photo of a Martian ridge taken by the Spirit rover. Oh, so these two photos are put here just to show how similar the Atacama looks to Mars. And they do look both very dry and without any life. Chris found that the air over the less dry areas of the Atacama had microbes, while the air over the super dry spots had no microbes at all. The balloon test suggested that the Atacama microbes weren't visitors carried by wind. Chris thinks that in less dry parts of the Atacama, microbes grew in the soil. The dirt is then kicked up into the air by the wind. That would explain why the amount of microbes in the air was the same as the amount of microbes in the dirt below. So he thinks the microbes are living in the dirt, And when it gets windy, the dirt blows up into the air. So that's how they got there. One thing is clear, however, in the driest parts of the Atacama, nothing can survive. There does seem to be a bit of life, a limit to life on Earth. At first, I hoped I could find a microbe in the Atacama that was somehow adapted to life without liquid water, said Chris. But it seems that where there is no liquid water, there is no life. So just think about that. Water is also in the air through water vapor, but he's saying that it's liquid water that is the most essential for life, or just life at all. Okay, here. So, paragraph 36. There may be no liquid water on Mars now, yet the Mars rovers Spirit and Opportunity proved that once upon a time, Mars did have liquid water, lots of it. Spirit found a rock that had been once soaked in water. Opportunity discovered wavy bands of rock formed by a long-lost sea. Scientists think Mars' surface had water for hundreds of millions of years. That's enough time for life to have evolved. So where might we find traces of ancient Martians? Chris thinks that the evidence of early Martian life may have been in a natural underground freezer on Mars. A natural underground freezer, just like the one in Siberia. I'm going to stop there, and then I'll pick up our next video with the sidebar.